In the vast cornfields of an isolated farm, a sinister presence began to awaken. It was a lonely scarecrow, erected in the middle of the plantation, its torn and dust-stained clothes flapping in the wind as if it had a life of its own. His face, made from a stuffed linen sack, wore a sinister blank expression, but his eyes seemed to watch every movement on the farm with a frightening, murderous intensity. Discover this terrible story that haunted a huge farm. But first, subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell to always follow this and other terrible news. For the inhabitants of the farm, the Scarecrow was just a harmless figure, erected to scare away the hungry crows that threatened the crops. However, as the nights became longer and darker, a sense of unrest began to settle in the farming community. Farm workers began reporting strange sightings of the Scarecrow at night, moving awkwardly across the fields in the pale light of the moon. They swore they heard ominous whispers echoing between the rows of corn, as if the Scarecrow himself was whispering dark promises to those who ventured too close. But despite the scary stories, no one on the farm took the reports seriously. After all, a simple scarecrow couldn't do any harm, right? However, as the weeks passed, a series of disturbing events began to plague the farm. Animals mysteriously disappeared during the night, leaving behind only traces of struggle and signs of a sinister presence. The cornfields, which once flourished with life, began to wither and die, as if an invisible plague was spreading rapidly across the land. And then, one fateful night, one of the farm workers disappeared without a trace. His companions found him the next morning, hanging from the iron bars that supported the Scarecrow, his body mutilated and marked by signs of indescribable violence. It was at this moment that the farming community realized the terrible truth that had been ignored for so long. The Scarecrow they erected to protect their crops was not an innocent guardian, but rather a messenger of evil, thirsty for blood and revenge. And so the farm found itself plunged into a nightmare from which there was no escape. With the shocking discovery of the truth behind the Scarecrow, a climate of fear and paranoia settled on the farm. Workers avoided the cornfields at night, fearing they would encounter the Scarecrow on his sinister rounds. However, despite efforts to contain the terror plaguing the farm, the disturbing events only intensified. More animals mysteriously disappeared, and strange and sinister marks began to appear on the walls of the farm's buildings, as if they were messages left by a dark, invisible force. The farmers, desperate to find a solution to the nightmare that haunted them, began investigating the property's old records, looking for clues about the farm's dark past. It was then that they discovered the Scarecrow's true origin and the terrible fate that had been reserved for those who dared cross his path. According to records decades ago, the farm had been the scene of a terrible tragedy. A lonely farmer, tormented by loss and heartbreak, had made a dark pact with hidden forces in exchange for power and revenge. He erected the Scarecrow as a macabre guardian of his property, but what he didn't know was that he had summoned an evil entity that fed on the pain and suffering of the innocent. As the farm workers uncovered the dark secrets of the past, a growing sense of urgency came over them. They realized that the only way to free the farm from the killer Scarecrow's rule was to face evil head-on and undo the evil pact that kept him imprisoned on those lands. But time was running out, and darkness continued to spread like a relentless plague over the farm. Determined to free the farm from the killer Scarecrow's rule, the farmers and workers gathered in secret to perform a liberation ritual. They knew that facing evil directly would require courage and sacrifice, but they were willing to risk everything to restore peace and security to the land they loved so much. Guided by ancient teachings and stories passed down from generation to generation, the farmers began preparations for the ritual. They gathered rare and precious ingredients, collected amid the shadows of night, and drew ancient symbols on the floor of the old farmhouse where the dark pact had been sealed so long ago. As the night progressed, an atmosphere filled with tension and expectation enveloped the farm. The air was filled with the scent of incense and aromatic herbs as those participating in the ritual prepared to face the unknown. When the time finally came, the farmers gathered in a circle around the makeshift altar, their voices uniting in an ancient song of protection and hope. They invoked the ancestral spirits and cried out for divine assistance in the imminent battle against the evil that haunted them. As the last words of the ritual were chanted, a bright, sparkling light burst into the night sky, illuminating the farm with a divine luminosity. It was as if the universe itself was responding to the farmer's call, offering its protection and guidance in the fight against darkness. Amidst the bright light, the murderous Scarecrow emerged from the shadows, its distorted form writhing in pain and agony. He tried to resist the power of the ritual, but he was powerless before the united strength of the farmers and their supernatural allies. And then, with an anguished cry, the Scarecrow was consumed by divine light, disintegrating into a gust of wind and energy. The farm was silent for a moment as the farmers took in the magnitude of what had just happened. But despite their apparent victory, they knew that evil never completely disappears. Peace had returned to the farm, but they would remain vigilant, ready to face any threat that dared challenge the light of hope that now shone upon their land. Despite the apparent victory over the killer Scarecrow, the farm was not completely free from the shadows that haunted it. As the days passed, disturbing signs began to emerge, suggesting that the evil had not yet been completely eradicated. Animals continued to mysteriously disappear, leaving behind sinister marks of struggle and fear. The cornfields, which had begun to recover with the Scarecrow's departure, began to wither again, as if an invisible presence was draining the life from the plants. Additionally, farmers began reporting strange and unexplained sightings in the shadows of the night. Indistinct figures moved stealthily among the rows of corn, their eyes shining with a sinister light that chilled onlookers to the bone. Despite efforts to investigate these disturbing phenomena, the farmers found no logical explanation for what was happening. They began to wonder if the evil they had faced was still present on the farm, just waiting for the right opportunity to resurface and resume its reign of terror. Paranoia spread among the farm workers as they struggled to remain calm in the face of the unknown. The nights became increasingly long and lonely as the fear of what could be lurking in the shadows haunted them every moment. But despite the darkness that surrounded the farm, a spark of hope still burned in the hearts of the farmers. They refused to give in to despair, determined to discover the truth behind the signs of darkness that haunted them and to restore the peace they longed for in their lands. As the days passed, the atmosphere of fear and distrust on the farm only intensified. Workers could barely sleep at night, haunted by terrible nightmares and the feeling that they were being watched by invisible eyes in the shadows. The signs of darkness that were plaguing the farm became increasingly evident. Entire fields of crops withered and died in a matter of days, as if a malignant plague had been unleashed upon the land. Animals continued to disappear without a trace, leaving farmers perplexed and fearful for the future of their livelihoods. Furthermore, reports of strange sightings and sinister encounters were multiplying among farm workers. Unsettling shadows seemed to move among the rows of corn at night. Unknown whispers echoed across the empty fields, and mysterious markings began to appear on the walls of farmhouses, as if some unseen force was trying to communicate with the living. Despite their efforts to combat the evil that surrounded them, the farmers felt powerless in the face of the darkness that seemed to be swallowing their land. They began to wonder if they had underestimated the true nature of the killer Scarecrow, and if the evil they had faced was more powerful than they had ever imagined. However, even in the face of despair and uncertainty, a flame of courage still burned in the farmers' hearts. They refused to give in to despair, determined to fight to the end for the survival of their farm and the hope of a future free from the shadows that haunted them. But as the darkness intensified, they knew the battle for the soul of their land was just beginning. With the farm shrouded in increasingly dense darkness, the farmers and workers find themselves facing an ominous crossroads. They knew they could no longer ignore the evil presence plaguing their lands, and that the time to confront evil head-on had arrived. Determined to face the unknown, the farmers called an emergency meeting to discuss the next steps. Amid the shadows of night, they hatched a courageous plan to face the darkness that surrounded them and restore the peace that had been lost. Armed with torches and agricultural tools, the farmers set out on a daring journey through the cornfields, determined to find and confront the source of the evil that threatened their farm and their lives. As they advanced through the rows of corn, the feeling of restlessness and danger intensified. The air was permeated with an ominous energy, as if the environment itself was writhing in agony under the rule of darkness. Finally, they arrived at the epicenter of evil, a field of corn that seemed to pulse with evil energy. In the center of the field stood an imposing, shadowy figure, the murderous Scarecrow, his ominous presence enveloping them like a fog of despair. Without hesitation, the farmers advanced, brandishing their torches and facing the Scarecrow with relentless courage. A fierce battle unfolded, with blows exchanged and counterblows thrown in the darkness. But despite his valiant efforts, the Scarecrow was a formidable force, fueled by the evil that had infected the land. It seemed that victory was beyond the reach of the farmers, who found themselves increasingly entangled in the clutches of evil. However, in a moment of desperation and determination, one of the farmers had a bold idea. He remembered his grandmother's old stories about the need to face evil with purity of heart and unwavering courage. With a cry of determination, the farmer threw himself at the Scarecrow, his unshakable faith and fiery courage banishing the darkness that enveloped him. And so, with a flash of divine light, the murderous Scarecrow was consumed by the power of good, disintegrating into ash under the glow of the full moon. As the sun rose over the horizon, farmers looked out over the cornfields now free of the evil presence that had haunted them for so long. Peace had returned to the farm, and new hope was blossoming among those who had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. But while evil may have been defeated that morning, the farmers knew that the battle, with the killer Scarecrow finally defeated and the farm freed from the darkness that plagued it, a sense of relief and renewal began to spread among the inhabitants of the farming community. The cornfields, which had been marked by death and destruction, began to slowly recover as life returned to the land that had been dominated by evil. The farmers and workers came together in a joint effort to restore the farm to its former glory. They planted new crops, repaired damaged structures, and worked tirelessly to rebuild what had been lost during the dark days. As the weeks passed, the farm blossomed with renewed beauty, its cornfields gently waving in the wind like a promise of hope for the future. The inhabitants of the farming community found comfort and inspiration in the lessons learned during their journey through the darkness, and vowed never again to forget the power of courage, determination, and unity. As the sun set below the horizon, casting a golden light over the now revitalized farm, the farmers gathered to celebrate their victory over evil. They shared stories of courage and sacrifice, remembering the challenges they had faced together and the lessons they had learned along the way. And so, with a new sense of purpose and determination, the farm's inhabitants looked to the future with hope and optimism. They knew that the journey ahead would be difficult and full of challenges, but they were confident that as long as they remained united in their determination to face the unknown, nothing could stop their return to the light.